Welcome back, folks, to WP-Tonic. This week in WordPress and SaaS. It's episode 882. We've got a returning friend of the show. Always a great discussion. We've got Brian Jackson, the co-founder of Forgemedia, former Chief Marketing Officer at Kinsta. Brian, would you like to give a quick 30-second intro to the new listeners and viewers that might not have come across you before, Brian?
Sure, yeah. I think you did a good intro for my kind of background. So right now it's just my brother and me. We developed 2 WordPress plugins, Perf Matters and NovaShare, and that's pretty much what we do full time right now. So that keeps us plenty busy. And then I do try to blog on one of my blogs whenever I get time, but these days it's pretty much just plugin development, pretty much constant. So,
well, that was short and sweet. I've got my great co-host, Kurt. Kurt, would you like to introduce yourself to the new listeners and viewers?
Sure thing, Jonathan. I own an agency called Mañana No Mas. We focus largely on membership and learning websites, and I also run the Mañana No Mas podcast.
That's great. Like I say, we're going to be talking about all things AI, how Brian thinks it's going to be affecting content marketing in the short term and also in the medium term. We're going to be talking about how it could affect privacy and a load of other stuff. It should be a great conversation. Before we go into the meat and potatoes of this great show, I've got a couple of messages from our major sponsors. We will be back in a few moments, folks. Coming back, folks, just want to say we've got some great special offers from the sponsors, plus a curated list of the best WordPress plugins that me and my team utilize all the time to save you a load of hassle crawling Google to find the best solution for your clients. You can find all these goodies by going over to wp-tonic.com/deals. wp-tonic.com/deals, and you'll find all the goodies there. What more could you ask for? Probably a lot more, but that's all you're going to get on that particular page. So, Brian, let's go straight into it. I know you've been blogging a little bit. You've been discussing it in general a bit, so it's probably been in your mind. So, how do you see AI affecting content marketing, let's say for the short term, for the next year, and maybe got any views about how it might affect things in the slightly mid-term, the 2 to 3 year term?
Yeah, I think short term, I still think we're like kind of in a testing playground because things are going so fast. Like, I don't think it's slowed down yet. I think at some point it will like start slowing down as far as what content marketers can do, maybe not other stuff as far as AI, but as far as like just content creation, I think people right now, I'm just playing around with it every single day. I mean, I use it to like quick couple examples. It's like, like it's late at night. I'm writing something that I need to publish. I don't like how I wrote it because it's kind of like writer's block, or just because I'm tired. I'll just ask AI to rewrite it for me and give me a couple variations. And then most of the time, I actually really like what they spit back sometimes. So, and you can even pick. So, I mean, stuff like that is just huge compared to what we've had in the past. And I know growing up in high school, I launched tons of blogs. I flipped websites. So I was constantly figuring out ways to produce content. I've done I don't know if you've ever heard of iWriter. It's a place to get like dirt cheap content, not mostly the best quality, but like these were the places that people in the past went to get content. Like they went to third sources, pay $5, pay $10, pay quality, $500. Doesn't matter, but people would outsource it. And so now, in my opinion, like iWriter is irrelevant almost at this point. Like it's just like, why pay someone $5 when you can just have Google Bard or ChatGPT just spit out probably the exact same quality as what they were going to do for $5. That in the short term, I think you're just going to have all these sites publishing all this AI data. So what I think is going to be interesting in the long term is you're going to have a mix of AI written content and human written content on the web, like going forward. And so what I don't know what's going to happen is how Google is going to treat this. Like, because Google already has said that they're going to
Can I interrupt slightly?
Sure. Yeah.
Do you in your heart, do you think Google have any idea how they're going to deal with this? Because I don't think they even know.
I think the search engines are also scrambling, like a lot of other people are with the AI changes. But I also do think that they're pretty smart too. I know a lot of people don't like Google and hate Google SEO.
They do no evil, do they?
So, but I also think they're pretty smart at detecting things too. And if they'll figure out a way to detect AI content pretty accurately, that is long term. I would be more worried about, if I was a content marketer, say, making a whole site with like 90% AI written content. Because right now, I don't know how much you've tried this yourself, but like you can still tell that things are not 100% quality yet when you spit out. Like if you try to do an 800-word article on what is WordPress, there's a lot of stuff repeating right now, and it's just not to the quality that like a human would write it yet. And so
I'm sorry to interrupt.
It will get there though.
So because you kind of touched this. Obviously, you're a very experienced content professional. You've based a lot of your career on producing, and you were well known for the quality of content and your part. Obviously, it was a team enterprise, but your part in the initial success that Kinsta managed to generate. But you touched on it, we also got to be honest here, before AI, a lot, and I'm not going to choose some specific targets, but it's well known that there are certain WordPress-based businesses that just flooded search and WordPress-generated topics with basically low-quality content, which came from the from the Indian subcontinent. They were content farms, which it's well known, isn't it? I don't think I'm saying anything anybody in the industry doesn't know. What's your response in what I just said?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the content is written overseas because like $5 an article, like you couldn't live in the US making that much. So that's why a lot of the low quality content is just written overseas where cheaper content.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is I haven't put it very well, is that Google puts out, it's all about quality, yet when it suits it or when it's technology, it's consistently ranked sites that are known in the industry to produce consistent garbage. So I find that interesting. Can you put any? I've interrupted twice because I wanted to get to the meat of what really interested me. Can you give any insight why Google consistently puts? And you based your career on quality, and it was successful. But there's other sites that it's just garbage, yet they get results. So I'm puzzled.
Well, and I won't name anyone either. But like when I met with Kinsta, like that was the whole goal, was like, we see what's in the WordPress space as content wise. Like we know we can do it better. Let's just grind for 2 years as hard as we can at this, like focus on quality. And that was really our whole goal. And like, I think we accomplished it pretty well. And then I did, like, we saw other companies kind of try to copy the stuff and start, let's do longer articles. Let's hire higher quality writers and try to replicate the thing. And so like there is better content, I think, these days. But like you said, there's companies that are still producing consistent, just like, I don't even understand like why they even bother producing something, because it's so low quality, like on a consistent schedule. And so I think a lot of that still has to do with Google. I think people might not like this either, but like domain authority, backlinks, all of this still plays into the equation at some level. Like it's impossible to know how much, but like time in the market as far as SEO goes to is huge. Consistency is important. I think Google looks at like frequency of publishing. Doesn't mean you need to push out 5 articles a month, but do 1 article a month consistently, something like that. So all of these things take play. And so like, you know, some of the bigger companies, they've been pushing out content for what, 12 years, 15 years. So, I mean, they have a lot of stuff floating out there. And so I think for a brand new company, like just entering today, like even with high quality content, like you're going to have a couple years of really hard grinding regardless.
Oh,
now,
tell me, because but my domain authority has increased recently, getting close to 70 using Ahrefs.
Oh, good.
Which for a small business, I think is an enormous achievement.
And all I've focused on is always seeing consistent small growth. Like it could be big growth or small growth. Like either one is a win in my book. So if you're seeing like small wins, I think just keep doing exactly what you're doing. But the AI brings a whole new kink into the equation type of thing, because before it was just like beat high quality content. That was the strategy at Kinsta. And so like there's a whole new situation here, because when I was hired, AI wasn't even really a thing in content marketing. It didn't even exist. Like ChatGPT wasn't there. So I think you're going to see hybrid approaches, to be honest. If I was a writer right now, I would be using it to summarize things. I would be using it to write maybe less important parts of the article that are just more grunt work type of thing.
Oh yeah, but I've been working with my team, and we just used it as a way of doubling the amount of content we're producing each month. It needs, I mean, I'm not going to go into the specific tools, we might do a bit later on, but it does need, you know, you do need out, you know, the more time you put into the outline, the more time you put in the keywords. It does need editing afterwards. The other thing, I think, this is only my opinion, I just want to see if you think I might be, because you're an expert. I've become more than I wouldn't say I was an expert, I've become very educated in it because I had to. But you've been paid for it, so I consider that you're an expert. I am not being paid for it, so I don't consider that I am expert, right? When somebody actually gives you money to do something, that's when I think you can start saying you've got some expertise in it. Is that they're going to look, I think, if they see, if their technology can sense that it's been AI written and there's something that hasn't been AI written and they think it's better content, they're going to go for the better content. I think they're also going to look for extra triggers, like, has it got a video? Is it linked to a podcast? Is it linked to a webinar? Is it linked to other signals that shows expertise or knowledge in that particular subject which the article is produced? Do you think I'm on the right track there?
No, 100%. I think they're going to look at other factors. But like you said, I think they're going to see, like, if you have a high quality content versus high quality content with some AI stuck into it, like that might hurt you at some point too. Like they might use that as a detriment against you. So I would be careful with people out there just like using AI too much to begin with, because we really don't know what's going to happen yet as far as ranking goes. Like, again, like I said earlier, it's all kind of like testing playground right now. I'm sure there's tons of people doing 100% content AI based sites right now just to experiment. I know that's happening. And I would be curious 3 years from now to see how well those are actually performing. So, but again, it determines on like what Google and Bing and them determine as far as like what is AI content. So I don't think that's the scary part, is we don't know what's going to happen yet. I don't think 2 years, 3 years from now. Just to be careful is a warning, I think.
How do you think they're going to, because obviously they're in a dilemma, because obviously apart from direct purchasing of e-commerce products, you know, a lot of their income, obviously they've diversified, but the main profit center is still paid search. You know, obviously the initial thing with OpenAI was it could answer your questions, so you didn't have to do any searches. I always thought that was overplayed, because you got to know the right questions to ask anything. And a lot of people in the initial searches to find the right questions to ask, if you know what I mean. So I always thought that was overplayed. But how do you think Google's going to, because obviously Google's in a between a rock and a hard place, because I think I am correct. They rely on search income. You know, it's the thing that's just, it just pours money in for them, doesn't it?
No, you're right. And I think there's always going to be that battle between paid SERPs and organic SERPs. And unfortunately, I think the organic just seems to be getting harder and harder and harder ever since I've started. It's just gotten worse and worse and worse. And now with AI, I guess you could say it. I don't know how you want to look at that. Some people might say it's worse because of that. People say it's easier because of that. But like you said, like a lot of their business is on paid search. So like, I wouldn't be surprised if they take more space for paid search with all this stuff going on with AI. But another fun fact, I was just remembering this, is that Tom from Kinsta actually tweeted this out the other day. It says 26 of the top 100 most popular websites are blocking the GPT bot from crawling their sites. So that means you have the biggest companies in the world not letting these AI.
Well, that's that. You just touched the other side, because this is this is IP infringement on steroids, isn't it? Though this is, already authors, artists, they need to get together, because this has always been part. Google has been the biggest thief in history, hasn't it? No, fundamentally, they're robbers, aren't they? Really, but this is just putting it on steroids, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and I've even considered, gone through that thought process. Like, if I wrote a high quality article, do I want like Google Bard and ChatGPT to be able to grab all the info in a split second that I just wrote without having to even go to my website? Like, that seems like a negative thing to me.
Just a bit.
Yeah, just a bit. So it's like, I've thought about almost doing the block myself, because I haven't done it yet, but like I've definitely considered it. If I was running a big company, like I would have, have thought through this a lot more, but I've definitely considered doing that, because it's just, if something can just grab it and they just like, oh, okay, don't even need to go to the website. Got my answer. I'm done. I can go to my next thing. That's a problem. And that's going to keep getting worse. So I think that's going to hurt content marketers in the long run, for sure.
Right. Over to you, Kurt.
Well, my question, Brian, is it's an extension of the first question, but it's from the other tangent. So you started to talk about things like content providers, almost like private label rights, like where people would in the past or even still currently would say, oh, well, I'm going to subscribe to this content source or whatever. Right. And now we can kind of do this for free, looking at these new tools. But I'm always driven by, and you guys were touching on this with high quality, low quality and stuff like, and I'm thinking about people that make their living doing this stuff, like being content marketers and content. And that's, you still have to be the subject matter expert. You still have to review everything that comes through that. And so I was kind of wondering where you might think that leads for roles and positions in different, we say content marketing, but like in the short term and midterm, 2 to 3 years, how do you think this will kind of change the role or the placement of personnel based on working with AI? Because writers will still have a job, but I think their job might be different.
Their job will be different. So I think it's definitely going to speed up content creation. I think at different levels, it depends on how much the writer is using AI. But like for right now, if I was at a company and hiring someone, I would not be changing any positions as far as like editors go or any of that stuff, because we don't know, again, like what's Google going to detect as far as AI. So like, I think it would be like the base level writers. If you had like a kind of a structure already, the base level writers are the ones going to be benefiting, I think, from the AI in their workflows, because they're going to be cranking this stuff out, Google Doc here, AI here, and they're going to be, you know, going back and forth, and it's going to be speeding up their workflow. But as far as like editors go, I would not be touching that right now. I'd be the same workflow because I've just seen so many low quality things from Bard and ChatGPT that it's just not there yet. Now, 3 years from now, I would be more worried about like the editor roles and like the ones that are kind of like prettying up the content right before you go to publish, because I think AI is going to get better at this. And it's going to get smarter and less like repeat sentences and less generic stuff. So I think companies need to be thinking about that, because I think it's gonna hurt writers at all levels, to be honest. Or maybe a company will say, take that editor position. Now he becomes the writer because we don't want to lose the editor, and we can get rid of some of the lower level, maybe just content writers. Like I could see that happening too, because now the editor, you know, he probably knows the company really well already, workflow. If he can just publish content at a faster rate himself, and then he's already editing it, it's just, so I could see both of those scenarios happening. I think writers are going to be less and less going forward, for sure.
It's super interesting to kind of see it all kind of play out, because I use the tools a lot myself, and it's like I still need to go through it and go, okay, well, I need to add my touch, my story, my experience, but the facts are kind of there. And then sometimes one of the facts is wrong. And so that's where the subject matter expert has to step in and go, oh, well, this is incorrect, you know? But I've been finding it real interesting to look at other people's published works and go, well, they're missing that element. They're missing that subject matter expert person that comes in and cleans it up and adds that touch.
Yeah. And they're not going to win if they're still missing that stuff, in my opinion, because like, I mean, just having done so much content at Kinsta, like we made sure every article while I was there, like none of that missed any of those things. We double checked everything. I mean, I would spend weeks sometimes on a single article writing it, and so many hours. And so you're still going to have high quality content winning in the end. Like you said, if you're missing.
Yeah, but you were, you know, the only other people that I really admire that I thought were up to your standard to some degree was Elegant Themes. You know, the Divi people, they're monsters. You know, they've always been good at their SEO, and you know, they're just a monster machine. They've got a whole team churning out stuff, but they do it a pretty good job. But most of the other people, they're just crap, aren't they? Let's be honest about it. It's just it's like absolute shit they're knocking out, isn't it?
Well, and it doesn't make any sense to me, because like you can go, I haven't looked at this for a while, but I can guarantee you you can go look at Ahrefs or SEMrush and look at the organic traffic for Kinsta. Like it's just constant growth, consistently, all the way up, and it's still going. So it's like the other companies, I've looked at some, and I looked at a lot while we were doing things competing, that like they had this like up and down. So I have never understood, like, why would you spend the money, the time, even with the workflow of the content, if it's not going to produce results? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. So, and like you said, I think a lot of them know that it's garbage too. If you asked like the head marketer at some of these companies, I don't think they would say like they produce the highest quality content in the space.
Well, it must work. Yeah, but the only thing I would disagree with what you just said is it's a bit like it must work, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, that's it. But if the less work doesn't produce the results you want against your competitor, maybe I look at it from a different view altogether. But like if I'm writing content, I want it to work for me, essentially. That's always how I viewed SEO and content. And so yeah, it's just weird. When I've looked at other companies, I never understood some of the workflows, like you said, like this consistent garbage cycle just over and over and over. And some are still doing it, even the ones that
I would say 80% are doing it. I'm not trying to be
never stop.
You know, there are some people, like I say, the Divi. I remarked to Kurt that when you look at their articles, you know, I utilize them as a way of laying out my own articles, because I don't know if you've been to my own website, but we produce a lot of content. a lot of video, a lot of podcasting, a lot of articles, a lot of everything. Hasn't made me a rich man yet, Brian. This is the problem.
No, but I think you might have an advantage going forward, because I think with AI, I think like personal branding and other forms of revenue other than content are going to help a lot more than they have even in the past. So like having a podcast, having subscribers, having more than just relying on organic SEO. Because when we were doing Kinsta, we weren't doing paid ads at the start. We were 100% organic content and word of mouth. That was the whole business model at the start. And while it worked really well for us, I think that would be I would think it would be harder today. If you started literally today doing that exact same thing, it would be a lot harder. I think like what you're doing, having different forms of places that people can find you, I think is going to be incredibly important going forward.
I think you're right, but I think the only thing that is to what I call, I don't think it's actually an English word, but it never stops me, Brian. I just make up words if I like the sound of it. Nicheify. Find a niche. I call it nicheifying. I don't think it exists. It should do, though, shouldn't it, Brian? It's a fantastic word, isn't it? Nicheify. I think so. Oh, Jesus, folks. I'm such a bonky interviewer, aren't I? So, Kirk's bonkers in general. Yeah, it's fine. I know it's a cliche. You know, you go to all the experts and they say, find your niche, find a niche website, you know. But I think there's some truth to it, isn't it? Because I think that's linked to Bill. Because I think you were so right. It's about domain authority, and to get that, I've got another business, and trying to get the domain authority up. It has been so well. It's taken me 8 years to get a pretty high domain authority with WP-Tonic. It's so I think that's what you're saying around domain authority, isn't it? It's becoming even more of a slog, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think another important fact is I actually just sold I used to run a gluten-free website.
Yeah.
I just sold that a couple month or so ago, and I don't want to scare anyone here, but there's two reasons I sold it. Is one, I didn't have any time. Wow, we got the FaceTime animation to go.
Two reasons. Who did that? It wasn't me.
It was the thumbs up, I think, that did it. But the first, I didn't have any time to work on it anymore. But second was AI. Because of the reason that I didn't have any time to really spend on it, I know that people with AI, they're going to be coming for it every single day, like just throwing out new content like competitors. So like having that in mind, I thought it was better to get rid of that site since I didn't have any time and more focus on my plugins and stuff. So I would make just like a word of caution to people, don't spread yourself too thin with all this AI stuff happening with content, because you want your content where it matters to really be the focus. So that's important too.
All right, we're going to go for our break, folks. It's been a fascinating discussion. Hopefully I haven't butted in too much. I get complaints, Brian. I understand, but hopefully you could see why I butted in a little bit. Brian's much more knowledgeable on this subject than me. But I think it's been an insightful discussion. We're going to go for our break. We've got some other great topics. We will be back in a few moments, folks. Back, folks, for the second half of this great discussion about all things AI, content marketing. It's a passion for me, so I was looking forward to this discussion with a true expert on the subject, a true Seth Lord of content marketing. But before we go into the second half, I just want to point out that if you're looking for a great hosting partner in the WordPress space, why don't you look at WP-Tonic? We specialize in membership and community-focused websites, but we offer great hosting for WordPress professionals. Plus, we can be your backup for when you've got tasks that you can't handle yourself. We're there for you. Plus, we offer 5, 10, and other website packages, hosting packages, special deals for WordPress professionals. To find out all these goodies, go over to WP-Tonic/partners, WP/tonic.com/partners. Find out what we can offer and book a chat with me. We love you to become a partner with us. So, what do you think of that, Brian? It wasn't too bad, was it?
Oh.
No, there we go. I think that's high praise. So I think you just touched it. You just flogged one of your sites into your main plan. What are your plans connected to adapting to the world of AI, linked to marketing? Well, I think you just touched that in the second half. You're flogging some of your sites. Is that about it?
Well, yeah, I guess that's the answer. Drop some of the low-hanging fruit, I guess is what you should do. But yeah, I think focus is going to be super important. And like, I'm still focused on content on our plugin sites, like 100%. It's just, I didn't have time to, like, in the evenings, like sometimes I would get a passion for writing something about gluten-free because I'm gluten-free because of an autoimmune condition. So I have a big passion for that. But I just had to say, like, is the passion worth it with where everything's going? And so I was like, well, I'll drop the passion because it didn't make sense business-wise. So yeah, I think drop the low-hanging fruit is one thing. And what was your, like, anything else I've learned? What was the question?
What are your plans for your own business to adapt to the world of AI? You've got a small plugin shop. A lot of the listeners to this particular podcast are WordPress professionals, agencies, plugin people themselves, implementers. It's the professional crowd that listens to this podcast. I'm sure they're in, because they're in the same boat that you are with your plugin shop.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing is, if anybody hasn't started using it, is just to go out first and start trying to use it every day. I mean, make a Chrome web app. That's what I do. Like, I have Google Bard, like, actually pinned in my Mac dock, so I can click it and it's one click away. That's how much I use it, back and forth. So that's a great suggestion. I would start doing that if you haven't. And think about, I've actually started using it for tickets even. Now, I'm not talking about writing, but things. Now, I'm not the main developer. My brother is the coder, like the hardcore coder. So I can code things, but I'm super slow. That's the thing. So once in a while, I'll try to take a ticket trying to save him time because he's working on something else. And I've actually started using Google Bard to, sometimes we'll need a code snippet for a customer that needs something more like tweaked a little more. And so I've used it to actually double check my code. And it's actually been super handy as far as like checking my, like if it's correct or not. Something that like would take me a little longer to like go look at like Stack Overflow, piece it together because I'm not like a coding every day. And so I've used it a lot for that as far as tickets go. So like if you can find a way to work it into your support ticket somehow, whether it's code, maybe summarizing things that you frequently say back in tickets, stuff like that, I would think about that workflow. Then of course, content production, is another thing. I will be honest, a lot of our content is docs. So it's so technical that I can't really use AI yet because it's so, like you said, niche, that AI just doesn't know what we're doing. So that is going to be tricky, I think, for some people that are so far down the rabbit hole. I was talking about this on another podcast the other day with someone. Is like, WordPress is messy, and I like to say that a lot. And anyone that's been in it long enough knows how just messy it is. And so, like, our plugins are so far down the niche that like it would be hard to produce anything with AI, like as far as content goes, other than a generic like, your top 5 WordPress optimization plugins, which I don't like doing list posts at all anyway. So as far as that go, you can't really use AI to say, like, this is the setting you need to fix and enable to fix this in PageSpeed Insights, and then also tweak this other thing. It's just too far down the rabbit hole. So I think it depends on what your business is and how deep you're going into stuff. I think on your website, you probably deal with some more broader marketing topics, right? So like I can see like AI like helping with that type of stuff. But so I think it really depends on the business, what you're doing. But try to work it into your content production if you can. That's what I say.
Over to you, Kurt.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear Brian talk about stuff because I can remember it wasn't long ago I was working on an article and it was like, SEO optimization and looked for the top questions and the keywords and what struck me was the piece I was writing was that it's like there's not a lot of data or content on it yet. So then you're like, well, this is like the piece that SEO might be based on in the future, but there's nothing really to go on now. So you just feel like you're stabbing at it. You're just kind of like, well, I hope this works. What kind of tools and services do you think helps people in that regard? You've mentioned Bard and you've mentioned ChatGPT and stuff, but are there other tools that really help you kind of ramp up, or do you just kind of stick to the two basic ones?
I stick to the basics, and already, I mean, I'll be completely honest, I already feel old and behind in this space. And I know other probably feel the same way as far as like there's so much to keep up with these days. It's just beyond almost ridiculous. And like I do a lot of reading and I keep track, and like I even have a newsletter I put out once a month with an AI section that kind of keeps me looking at things too. So, because I don't want to fall behind. And, but yeah, Bard, ChatGPT, let me see what else I'm doing here. I do sometimes use the Bing one as well. I think that's based on ChatGPT technically, but Bing has some cool little features in there too. But honestly, that's my workflow at the start. I know. Let me see if I have it bookmarked still. There's other tools out there like surferseo.com. This is one someone sent me the other day that I haven't looked at yet. But there's a lot of these companies popping up as far as like be my all-in-one SEO AI tool. Actually, another one I have played with a little bit now that I remember it is I can find it here.
I sent them on a search.
Yeah, sent him on a
search.
Yeah,
you sent me on a search here.
Yeah, but Surfer SEO, I've been using NeuroWriter, and it's definitely not got the kind of polished interface of SEO Surfer, but I got it at a special deal, and it seems to do a pretty job. I can tell my competitors that are utilising it as well because over the past couple of years, that's all I do is SEO and knock it out. I've become a junior version of Brian Jackson. Actually, it's scary, really. But there we are. You got to do what you got to do, haven't you? Have you found what you were going to recommend, Brian, or you still searching?
I did. Yeah, writeblogger.com.
Yeah.
And that's from like Andy and Ryan, like are two great guys that make the tool. Like Andy actually has a couple WordPress plugins, and then Ryan has been a blogger. I mean, full time I think for the past like decade. I think I used to chat with him while I was at Kinsta because I forget if he was a client or not, but I've been connected with these two guys kind of for a while on the online. And yeah, their tool I think is really promising just because I know they both deeply understand the WordPress side and the blogging side, which I think is get these animations you're going to get, which I think is
Who's doing this? Have you got somebody got access to your account?
I think it's a new, I don't know if it's Sonoma or I've seen this on FaceTime with my brother too. I don't know what's triggering. I have to figure that out. I'll have to Google that later. But yeah, I like their tool because I think I know the two guys and I know they know both sides. So I think I'm watching that tool to see like what they're doing because I think that might become really cool. But tools like that, I think maybe might help people. Like if they find one that's worked really, really well with their workflow. But for me, I'm primarily just using Google Bard when I can. And I'm actually making a Trello card with a list of like, I'll eventually probably publish this, but of like any task I've used AI for, kind of like a huge task list of things that I personally use it for. So eventually maybe I'll tweet it or do a blog article, or because I think that might be helpful for people just to see like here's all 100 different tasks of what I've used it for over the course of the last year or something like that.
So When it comes to Forgemedia, how long you and your brother been running Forgemedia full time?
We've been, the LLC has been around for, I think, since like 2017. But I left Kinsta in 2020.
Right.
So we've been going full time for about, and I was in January. So it's been about almost 3 full years now.
Yes,
full time at this. So
what's been a couple of things you might be prepared to share that you've learned in this journey? That I wouldn't say surprised you, but you now realise you should have put more emphasis on at the beginning.
I think figuring out when we originally launched, we had a WP coupons and perf matters. So those were our two. And again, these were plugins that we kind of created on the side while we were both working full-time jobs. We didn't think they were more hobbies. We weren't planning to start a business at all. That was never in the cards for us. And it just kind of turned into one of those things people kept asking, like, what's that plugin on your blog, blah, blah, blah. And then it turned into something more eventually. But one thing we learned was to do market research before launching a plugin, if you're going to do it. Because like our coupons plugin, we've actually phased out development on that now. So like we've pretty much shut that down. And because the space just isn't big enough, that plugin was targeting affiliate marketers in the WordPress space that use coupons. So, and I think the original thought was like, I've been doing affiliate blogging for years, and all these places have coupons, and you know how it goes. But that space is just not big enough to sustain a business. And so we found that like we've had to just phase that out on that plugin because it wasn't growing and the space just wasn't big enough. So I think anyone starting out, like, make sure it's not too far down in a niche. You want to find a niche, but not too far down, because it could be just slow grinding and you never get anywhere if it's too far down. So we then had Perf Matters, just that for a while. And then we launched our social sharing plugin, NovaShare. And that one has been seeing slow and steady growth, but better. It's a bigger space, like social media sharing plugin. And so that one has been doing better. So, but yeah, so find a niche, but not too far down the niche. I guess that's the advice. And I know that's hard to figure out too, but at least do some research. We didn't do any research at all. It just turned from a hobby to a business, and that really hurt us because we had to go through, should we shut this down? Should we, all this stuff you don't really want to go through later. So,
can I ask you, why do you think that happened? Because you're one of the sharpest people I know. You're you're a murderer, as we say in London. You're very unassuming, low profile, but you're a pretty sharp dude. So why do you think that happened in a way?
I mean, I'll be completely honest. I think it was, we didn't do any research. We thought we had a good idea and could make money off of it, but we didn't. We thought the coupon space would be bigger than it is, and it's just not. And so like there's data out there for this stuff that like you can go find better, and like look at search traffic, look at keyword traffic, look at all the stuff around your plugin space. Like look at the WordPress repository, like look at how many competitors. We didn't do any of that. So but again, I think part of it was because we started it as a hobby. We got people asking for it. We decided to sell it and kind of morphed into a business. But again, I think I think a lot of businesses kind of start that way in the WordPress space too. So, but again, I think you need to do your market research. If you're starting to do a brand new plugin, do the research first, because you don't want to end up in the same situation further down the road. It's not fun. Another thing I would say is the thing I've learned over my course of my career, ever since high school, is consistency is more important than almost anything else. I've flipped so many sites. I've started so many new sites. If I could go back in time and change one thing, I think this was one question you had in your thing, Jonathan, was I would have blogged on one site and never changed ever. My personal site has been on like brianleejackson.com, blog.brianleejackson.com, okmarketing.com, workup, and now I have brianleejackson.com again. So it's changing all of these things. You get diluted with all your content over time too. And so if I could go back in time, it would just be focused on one brand, one thing for 10 years. A good example of this is, never know if I'm pronouncing his name right, Saeed from WP Beginner.
Mhm.
He's done that website for the last, I think, 10, 12 years, and consistently. He has never stopped on that website. And that's why WP Beginner, like when we were at Kinsta, that was one of our biggest competitors, was WP Beginner, because he was so consistent.
I know, Brian, I know.
And everybody in the WordPress space knows probably what I'm talking about. But like, that is purely like, obviously there's technical SEO skills and writing and all this other stuff, but the number one thing he has for that was consistency. So like, if I could go back in time, man, I screwed that up a lot of times. And I learned at Kinsta was a real like light bulb moment of like, it took someone like paying me to grind, doing the same thing night and day for a couple years straight, thinking like, wow, I'm finally seeing things build on each other slowly over time. So I think that is one thing I've learned.
Right. Over to you, Kurt.
Well, please don't be angry, but you spurred another question in my mind that we didn't discuss earlier, and that is, I deal with a lot of clients and a lot of masterminds where like there's agencies all together, right? Like on a Go WP day or something like that. And a lot of people argue whether it helps SEO or hurts SEO to use that subdomain strategy, right? Like the main site's on the main URL, and then the LMS is on an LMS subdomain, and a blog's on a blog subdomain and stuff like that. Do you think it helps to split things up and be focused in those areas, or do you think it is better to keep everything compressed in one space?
From an SEO stand, from what I've personally seen, because I've had a lot of sites, I've had subdomains and I've had not subdomains.
Yeah.
I think it's better not to do subdomains. However, there is also a structural thing that comes into play as far as like, you know, like what if you have a WordPress site, but then your subdomain is like non-WordPress, like a portal that's not WordPress. So
you don't want to do that.
There's a yeah.
You don't want to. You need to talk to Jonathan at WP-Tonic.
That's
Brian.
true.
We've got some education for you.
Yeah, should be 100% WordPress. But there's other structural things to consider with that. But if I was looking at it just from an SEO perspective, I think it's always better to have it all in the same domain. I can give you an example. When we at Kinsta were going to launch the multilingual version, because we have it like 10 languages or something. And we decided, do we do subdomains or do we do, backslash the language or whatever? And we decided not to do the subdomains and went with the backslash. And I think it was a wise decision with going forward from what we saw. So yeah, I think SEO wise, I try to keep it always on the same domain. And again, I've had sites on both, and I think I personally does better if it's all in one domain.
Yeah, I'm part of another mastermind, and that question comes up almost on a monthly basis. And trying to explain it to people it can be mind numbing sometimes. But everyone has a reason for wanting to do it different. You know, it's WordPress, right? The curse and the blessing. It's flexible, but it's flexible.
Yeah. And sometimes due to the structure, like how you're separating things, sometimes it makes sense to separate it out. But if it was me and I could structure it all in the same domain, that's what I would always do. I would always do that first.
Excellent. I think I'll pass it back to Jonathan to see if we're ready for a time machine.
Well, linking to what you just said with Kurt, I think the other thing is I think any idiot can make things complicated. A true genius. The genius is making complicated things simple, isn't it?
That's true. And yeah, if you were just a simple thing of like choosing should your blog be on a subdomain or just /blog, like always choose /blog. That's a no-brainer in my opinion. But yeah, I think people can overcomplicate things sometimes and like.
Well, you notice that when you're dealing, I'm not trying to be funny here, but when you are dealing with people in the Fortune 500, you know, I'm going to get, you know, you find that their art is making making things as complicated as possible. Where true entrepreneurs, people that are building a business themselves, they learn the art is to make things as simple as possible, because so it's very two different mindsets based on my experience. But there we go. So obviously I'm a bit English, been living in America quite a while now, but I always see myself as English, really. So I was a great watcher as a child of Doctor Who and the TARDIS. So if you had your own time machine, you could go back to the beginnings of your career, Brian. Is there any advice that you would give yourself? Is any tips, that if you're mentoring the young Brian Jackson, that you would have liked to have to have told you?
Also, I binge watched.
Don't come on WP-Tonic for interviews.
I binge watched Doctor Who last year. First time I had never seen it. Amazing show. But yeah, if I could go back in time, I mean, the one thing I said earlier was consistency. That's one thing. But another thing is that it might be helpful. I have a blog post on my site, like 18 things I've learned from building WordPress plugins, like good and bad. Maybe go check that out on my site later. Yeah. I need to update it again. But like I try to share things like that, like handling taxes for your business. Like that's a nightmare that I didn't anticipate when I first got into my business. And so like, do you do an LLC? Do you do an S Corp? Do you pay someone to do the bookkeeping for you? Do you and yes, I actually do pay someone. I do the bookkeeping and the payroll. I think that's a good decision. And you can find someone that's actually pretty cheap these days. That's all they do is kind of that for everybody. But stuff like that, like should you charge VAT or not? That's an interesting discussion. I would be interested in the mastermind groups hearing what people are saying about that, because I've chosen to charge VAT to sales that, like, we have an EU VAT number and a UK VAT number. So when we're doing sales in the EU or UK, we charge VAT and then we submit it via the ridiculous mini one-stop shop thing that submits it to the member states. Is so ridiculous over there. But I've chosen to do that because I've never known, like, well, if I was to move the business overseas, I would already have this workflow in place. There's some reasons to just do it, even though I'm in the US, but do I need to do it if I'm in the US? Because they can't come over and do anything to me.
I'm definitely not doing that. Not doing that, but I leave that to your discretion, Brian.
So, and I've seen people on both sides of this when I've talked to them in the WordPress space. So for US businesses. So that's an interesting thing, another discussion. But like things like this that I had no clue that would come up when I went, just like, I'm going to start a WordPress business and it'll be great. And so, think about all the things if you're going to go full time that maybe you haven't thought of. Like do some more research again in the space. Another thing too was if you're selling multiple products, you should probably split that out into multiple Stripe or PayPal accounts, not put it into one. We did that early on and it was a mistake. You pretty much are screwed at that point if you can't separate it. So like separate that out unless you plan on selling your whole business later or something with, every product. So like separating things out is super important. And I know if some people are hearing this now and they've already done that, it's probably too late to go back in time and change it. But anyone new, think about that. But
I think
stuff like
I think you're giving enough value there. We're going to end the main podcast. Hopefully, are you okay just to stay on for another 10 minutes? Are you okay with that?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we're finished the main podcast part of the show, folks. We're going to stay on for some extra content. You'll be able to watch the whole show on the WP-Tonic YouTube channel. Please subscribe to that because it really does help the podcast and WP-Tonic in general. We will be back next week with another great guest. But Brian, What's the best way for people to find out more about you and your thoughts, Brian?
You can go to our agency site. It's forgemedia.io. Or my personal site is brianleejackson.com. And I'm on X as well. I got to try to start saying X. So I'm gonna try.
Nah, it's always going to be Twitter. so dim. Kurt, what's the best way for people to find out more about you and what you're up to?
Well, the agency name is Mañana No Mas. So anything that's Mañana No Mas online and social will come to me. And then I'm the only Kurt Von Annen on LinkedIn, which makes me super easy to find. And I'm pretty active on LinkedIn almost every day. So maybe we'll connect there.
That's great. Like I say, we've got some fantastic guests this month, and I booked some really amazing guests for November yesterday. So you've got some great content coming your way, listeners and viewers. We will be back next week. Remember, there's some additional bonus content that you can get on the YouTube channel part of this interview. We'll see you soon, folks. Bye. Oh, Brian, what do you think's going on in WordPress? Because we had our roundtable show last week, and we were discussing all the drama around the great leader Matt Manweg and all that. We touched it. I think Kirk was a little. I had a discussion. Kirk's my co-host. I think the conversation went well. Kirk was happy with. Always listen to Kirk's input because I can push it a little bit too far. But I'm just amazed at it all. Have you, I don't know if you followed it at all and if you got any sensible reflection about what you've observed, because you're a very common sense individual.
I mean, honestly, to summarize it really shortly is I'm really disappointed in how Matt has kind of just done stuff lately. Partially on his argument with Twitter with that lady. It's just downright childish in my opinion. Like there's no reason someone with, he has so many eyeballs on him. He has a responsibility, in my opinion, in the space to act a little more responsible. Now, I think there were problems on both sides of that conversation online. But I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and the thing that has really annoyed me is like keyboard warriors type of thing. It's like I was grown up, like golden rule. I grew up as Christian household, like treat everyone how you want to be treated, and like that's how I treat everyone on Twitter, on LinkedIn as well. And so, these arguments on social media are just downright childish and embarrassing in my opinion. And I don't think Matt's helping the space, haggling back and forth with people on that, trying to defend things. I think it'd be better just not to say anything, to be honest. But then that was the one drama. I don't know. I think there's other drama too. What was the other drama? There's so much to keep up with. But.
Well, I think the key of it is, a lot of people, are upset about where WordPress.com and WordPress.org and how, and in some ways I understand it, but the reality, this is just my reflection on it. I just want to see what you think, is that I think WordPress.com, it's better that people go to WordPress.com than going to Wix or Squarespace. And if that's the right solution, a hosted solution for them at that time, surely it's better that they're introduced to WordPress. And then if they need additional functionality to grow their business, which I think if your website becomes a real driver, you want full ownership and you probably need more functionality. But I think that's just the reality that do you want people where WordPress.org isn't the right solution just to go to Squarespace? But that's my reflection. What's yours?
I actually agree with you, I think. However, I'm probably coming at it from a different angle than a lot of people maybe listening to this, is that our plugins are premium only. So we don't rely on the repository at all for any traffic that we get. So as far as
Can I ask you? Can I ask you why you made that decision?
We made that decision partially. One, we didn't want to deal with all the drama of working on the repository, doing support tickets for free, which I don't think is a sustainable business model. I hate the premium to paid model, like trying to upsell. The whole reason you're on there is to upsell to your premium plugin most of the time. There's some great free ones out there, but most of the time it's just to convert them to pro. And if that's all you're doing, why not just focus on your premium version? Like, now, I think you get a lot of traffic too, though, from .org. So I can see the backlash from people that like have that workflow with lots of traffic coming in from .org, converting to paid traffic. And now WordPress.com is stealing a lot of that because that listing is showing on their site first instead of .org. And I can see their frustration. Like, I would be frustrated if I was in the same situation. Now, I agree with you. I think for people who are just entering the space, I don't want them landing on Wix either. I want them going into WordPress, however they get into WordPress, I think is a good thing. Now, I did see that they added on the WordPress.com sites like a little button that says go download this on .org now. So if you search Yoast and you find the Yoast plugin on WordPress.com, there is a button now that you can click and it says go download the one on .org. So that's kind of their Band-Aid, I think, to handle all the drama happening. But again, I think there's still a problem between a huge split between .org and .com. Like, and it's been confusing since I started in WordPress. Like, it's confusing for new people. Like Wix, Shopify, none of these places have this problem. It's a WordPress problem.
Well, yeah, but the other thing is, obviously I pointed out in the Roundtable show, this is publicly stated, it's on Wikipedia, that Automatic have taken 6 rounds over a 12-year period, and they've had over almost $900 million invested into Automatic from some of the biggest sharks in the VC world. These people are not kidding around, and they invested $900 million into Automatic. What do you think they want?
And I bet a lot of those investors are also into investing into Shopify and Wix behind the scenes too, which is even a bigger problem because they're not about just WordPress; they're about making money essentially.
So obviously they want either a return or something else or a combination. Exactly. Obviously, Automatic is envisioned that it will go public, but I am very I wonder about this because you would have thought. I think that one of the big criticisms is that obviously with WooCommerce, you've got a fantastic platform to become a real true competitor with a hosted solution that's a real competitor to Shopify. And that, in my mind, hasn't really materialized the way I would have envisioned it. What do you think of that? Or do you think there's been I'm underestimating the problems, really?
I think maybe they've been underestimating the problems. But speaking back to the Automatic thing, there's other problems than just the domains. Is that there's other subtle things that people might not be noticing. Is they took SiteGround off the WordPress hosting recommendations page and they replaced it with WordPress.com. So there's other things happening behind the scenes that they're trying to funnel as many people as they can into WordPress.com, hosting, plugins, like you name it. And so I think they're going to keep making these subtle changes. But again, it's hard to know. Like, does some of this need to happen to compete with Wix and Shopify? That's a hard one to because some days, man, I wish I had just a Shopify site. There's some days I'm banging my head. It's like 3 plugins, I roll out from WordPress are broken. There's other problems with the e-commerce platform, a bug I'm trying to fix, all these compounding problems that, Shopify and Wix sometimes don't have because they're so focused and there's only one way to do things. But again, that's why WordPress is great too, because there's 1,000 ways you can do stuff. So, but yeah, it's a tough one. You have people trying to make money behind the scenes, pushing WordPress.com. And now they're like siphoning away some of the WordPress.org visibility, essentially.
Yeah, just to finish off, I think it's a kind of, obviously there's the business side of it, but I think it's a cultural thing. I think there's a kind of need for drama, need for it to be all kind of, it's like, but the only sense is that he's got competing buckets of different groups of people that want different things. And he kind of says one story to one bucket and says another story to another bucket. And so the story becomes totally inconsistent because there's different people with the vision that comes from him, which is, you know, I think somebody that's a CEO of a major business has to have a little bit of that. But I think it's just been pushed to the outer limits. But that's only my take on it. And don't listen to me, listeners and viewers. So we're going to end the conversation. It's been fantastic, Brian. I think it's been a great discussion in general. Thank you so much for coming on. We'll see you next week, folks. See you soon.
Thanks.
Bye.